Okay, welcome to the Trickle Up, guys. I'm here with Alex Chaney from the Yang Daily Podcast once again. And what do we got on the low for this episode, Alex?
So we're going to be looking at what the repercussions are going to be of this Capitol riot on some of our highest serving members of Congress and the president.
Absolutely. And we have to talk about the Constitution has a clear level of responsibility at each level of Congress or each level of government. So when this happens, we have the 25th Amendment, which is the quickest way to turn key and say, okay, this person is no longer fit for duty. The vice president and the cabinet can make that move today. Bam, he's out. Didn't happen. Now, next line of defense against a psychopath is Congress. Congress must vote 2/3 vote, I believe it is, to impeach in both houses, in the House of Representatives and the Senate in Congress. So
you can see the problem already.
So we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at what everybody's talking about. This is what trended today was Amendment 14, Section 3. Now, let's not skip over the fact that number 2 or Section 2 talks about participation. Whoopsie. So in other words, if you participate in a rebellion, then you cannot be a part of the legislation, pretty much. You can't be in Congress. And then
it's very judgmental, right?
Yeah, how dare they? And then, of course, Section 3 talks about the same thing about giving aid of an insurrection. You know, so this goes from the president on down. All representatives in Congress, president, vice president on down, military as well, that if you engage in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof, Congress can vote 2/3 of each house to remove for such disability. In Section 4, this goes about like you will not get your pension,
right,
for insurrection and rebellion.
So legal scholars, they basically just say that if you engage in insurrection, Congress can kick you out with a vote of a 2/3 majority, and you get nothing. You can never apply to be involved in the government in an official capacity ever again.
You know, and Cori Bush actually has drawn up legislation already that she says day one, we need to vote on this, that we're going to remove everyone that aided, which is 5 specific Republican GOP members. I think she's going for their necks. I don't have a problem.
It'd be very controversial.
That'd be a tough one. I would
imagine even in the Democratic Party, that will be quite controversial.
Yeah. But I like Cori Bush because she don't give a shit. She's like, what's right is right. What's wrong is wrong. Let's go. And she's new on the block. She don't care. You know, I love it. It will be
dangerous. You got to be careful, though, with that kind of thinking because, you know, the Trump supporters think the same thing. Mm-hmm. They know what's right and they know what's wrong.
Of course they do. No, I don't think they're going to be able to remove people for questioning the votes. I don't know if that's enough to remove someone from office.
It's an interesting question. I mean, it's very clear that the objections they are raising are not supported by the law and they're not supported by the facts. They're making claims of voter fraud, but those have been checked out by 62 court cases, investigation by the Department of Justice. Every election official agrees that there was no widespread fraud in the election. You couldn't ask for any more agreement from official capacity that this election was legitimate. And them, you know, they're trying to cop it out and say that they're just representing the concerns of their constituents. Well, the fact is the concerns that you are supporting are against a free and fair election. And it's important to, you know, because they believe, the people who think this election was stolen, they think that they are supporting democracy. But it's important to remember that if you are not willing to accept the outcome of losing the election, you do not support democracy, because that's the entire thing, is that you are agreeing to peacefully relinquish and concede if you lose by the vote. That is democracy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you cannot agree to that, you do not support democracy.
Yeah. Well, and the big thing is voting rights are state issues.
Yes.
The federal government does not run elections. So this whole thing was really a formality in the past. All 50 states have been represented, and we're here to say, here's another one, here's another one. It's a formality, and the vice president's there to collect them all and say, yep, clang, hit the gavel, gives them something to do for the day. Because like you're saying, the objections are handled state by state case because every state's got their own rules and regulations. So
states' rights,
like you said, 1 for 61 or 62, I think it was. They've lost 60-something cases. The only one they got won threw out like a couple thousand votes in Pennsylvania that changed nothing because of a clerical error with handling, which is what should happen.
And to be clear, what Hawley and Cruz and them are objecting to, that the argument that they're using to object to those electoral votes is arguments that the state should have run their elections differently, that they should not have allowed mail-in voting the way they did, that, it shouldn't have gone for as many days as it did, accepting the votes after the election day or whatever. Just little technical things, and it's about voter access. They're objecting to changes to give voters more access to voting.
Mm-hmm. Or less, really. It's really about voter suppression when you demand an identification. They want federal overreach for constitutional laws.
Correct.
For state rights.
Yes.
Every state has the right to run their own election, period, including the presidential election.
And they're absolutely lying when they say that Congress is the correct forum to address those. They have already been addressed through the correct forums, which was the state courts. They even took it up to the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court was like, this has already been handled. This isn't the proper place to, So all of these have been addressed. These concerns have been addressed. They have been investigated. They have been declined as legitimate objections.
So if Cory Bush's legislation gets pushed forward, they actually do try to, I guess you'd say, prosecute. I wonder who the prosecutor would be. It'd be interesting what angle they come. I doubt it will. I honestly doubt it will. But that's where we're at. What's the fallout going to be for them is really unknown. Because we don't know what the fallout's going to be.
Well, I mean, we know one consequence already, which is pretty harsh.
Yeah.
Which is that Josh Hawley's not going to get his book published by Simon & Schuster.
Whoopsie.
And I mean, what more can you do to a man after that? Like, you've stripped his First Amendment rights, apparently. That's what I'm told.
And let's talk about the First Amendment rights, right? People on the right are now conflating First Amendment rights to private business censorship.
And they don't like the free market. That's what I'm hearing.
And by censorship means I won't publish your book on my platform. So Trump has been banned from Twitter, not YouTube. YouTube? Facebook?
No, he has not been banned from YouTube.
Yeah.
They have issued
Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and some others that I don't really know about.
And other than Twitter, as far as I've heard, those bans are potentially temporary, but could be permanent.
Twitter says we're not playing. We're done with you, son.
They basically said they're going to block him through the end of his term, and possibly beyond that.
Yeah. Well, and so we have to really talk about the First Amendment. The First Amendment's freedom of speech applies to governmental overreach, not private industry. Think of Trump and Twitter as the gay cake couple and the baker. Okay? The baker is Twitter. Trump is the gay people that wanted a cake made. You guys said you can't make a baker bake a gay cake. You can't make Twitter tweet a mean tweet from Trump. It's the same thing.
Well, let's not say it's the same thing. There is a slight distinction, which is that, Trump is inciting violence and insurrection versus the gay people just wanted a cake.
Yes.
So
it's a slight difference. Difference. But that's what I would argue with people is like, listen, you can't make the guy make a cake no more than you can make Twitter give him a platform, because we don't own our YouTube channel. We don't own our Twitter accounts. That is private property. and we're allowed to borrow it while we use it, and they can take it back anytime they want, so they can shut it all down. We have no right to private enterprise. Same thing with masks. This is my freedom. I'm free. This is America. No, it's a private business. No shirt, no shoes, no mask. Kick rocks and blow bubbles.
So what the First Amendment does is it says the government cannot censor you, cannot prevent you from speaking your mind, unless, in cases where you're actually going to directly cause harm to people, like yelling fire in a crowded theater. That's the famous one.
That's the big one. Yeah.
But what we're dealing with here is, these social media companies, they are private businesses, and they get to decide, what are the rules for who can participate on these platforms. They are amplifying your speech, and you do not have a right to have your speech amplified. You just have the right for the government to be protected from the government preventing you from speaking.
Well, in the government overreaching and making Twitter keep Trump's account is a First Amendment violation.
Yeah.
That's government overreach. Forcing
that would be the communist kind of stuff that some people are afraid of, is the government saying you have to amplify this person's voice no matter what they say.
Yeah. So the opposite of what they think is actually true on this point, where it's not a First Amendment violation. It's the opposite of that, because you don't want the government to be able to tell a private enterprise how to run their private enterprise when it comes to free speech, or not even free speech, just speech, whatever.
Right. Instead, it's supposed to be, a free market where the private businesses get to decide what they want to allow on their platforms.
Yeah.
And it turns out a lot of them don't want to allow insurrectionist incitement on their platforms. They don't want to allow conspiracy theories that harm people. And I think that's entirely reasonable. I agree with that. There is a legitimate conversation to be had about, the power that these social media companies have now, that it's basically considered, so like to run a lot of businesses and such, you have to kind of have a presence on these social media platforms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I understand that concern. Like if you get banned from these places, you are being censored pretty hard. Like if you can't go on Twitter, you can't go on Facebook, you can't go on Instagram, like there's a lot that's cut off from that you are cut off from. And it will limit your opportunities as a business. It will limit your opportunities as a person. But I mean, that's the free market. So, and if we're going to change that, that's going to require like governments dictating what can and can't be allowed on these platforms, which is a whole other issue.
Yeah. Well, the real sticky situation is too when they're sharing news content as truth, factual, claiming to be acting as a news source without any of the liability and responsibility that comes along with being a news source. And that's a really sticky situation where I think that needs to be talked about in the future of maybe a 21st century Bill of Rights when it comes to digital media.
I mean, I would say like the one intervention that I could agree with is the government imposing that, empirical facts, that you not be able to spread empirical lies, objective lies on these platforms. That seems reasonable to me, but clearly that's not the problem that Trump is having right now. No. The problem he's having is that he's not being allowed to spread lies.
How dare they?
Yes.
And this is the same reason Alex Jones got banned on YouTube, because of a guy showed up at this pizza parlor in New York City for having a basement that didn't exist with a gun. So yeah, I'm interested to see Vice President Pence didn't do his job. Boom. He should be done anyway. Now Congress, it's time for them to be put on the clock. You're on the clock. Tomorrow is Sunday or Monday. They're supposed to be addressing this impeachment thing. I think it'll go to the House rather quickly, but I'm not sure if they have 2/3 vote in Congress. It'll be close, I think. The Senate, of course, is going to be the huge hurdle where the most sycophant people are at, with the most money and the most risk reward type of thing. So it'll be interesting to see if these backroom deals don't get made at the local club or the local bar or whatever, a hookah, where these deals are made on the golf courses type of thing, where they might just say, you know what, guys, enough's enough. Let's just cut it. And they might do that. I hope so. That's the right thing to do. But we'll see.
Well, it's very clear what their incentives are at this point. They have made that abundantly clear that, they will go along with Trump in order to get the votes of his supporters. And so far, there has been pretty much no line that they will cross. The insurrection at the Capitol seems to be one that is causing enough consternation to shed a few off. Like, I believe we just had, Colin Powell said he was done with the GOP.
There's one GOP senator.
Collins from Alaska. She sort of said she was done with GOP. She said if it's going to be the party of Trump, which it pretty much is, then she's not sure she wants it to be her party.
Right.
I believe there is one other, but I don't remember their name.
There's a guy that came out today though. Another GOP sitting senator said, "I'm done with this. It's time to move on past this Trumpisms." Now I think
they have gone along with like the COVID conspiracies. They have gone along with the democracy conspiracies. They have been pushing this. They are responsible. They have been they share the blame for everything that's happened. And it's only just now when, shit hits the fan and they're seeing that consequences are coming through, that, Trump might be impeached or kicked out, that these senators, Hawley and Cruz and the rest, there might be consequences for them. Now they are saying, well, maybe I'm not okay with this.
Maybe.
But they have been doing it for money. They have been doing it for votes. And they have been ignoring their constitutional oath to uphold democracy because it benefited them. They put power over their constitutional responsibility.
But yeah, we'd like to hear what you guys think about this in the comment section. What do you guys think about this? Should Pence have used the 25th Amendment? Should Congress impeach him with so little time left on the clock? There's 10 days. It's over. And what should the fallout be for all the people that have aided and abetted this type of a coup attempt? It's going to be.
Most importantly, will Parler come back, and will Trump start that as the new Trump social media?
Oh boy.
On a Russian hosting service, no doubt.
That's true. It can't be here at Apple or Google.
We forgot to mention Amazon kicked Parler off of the internet because they were the hosting service. Amazon's not okay with hosting them anymore. And Apple and Google have both. Google has kicked them out of their store. Apple has said that they will kick them out if they don't revise and remove the content that is basically just straight up calling for, killing all the Democrats and taking over the government.
Yeah. Where can we find more content from you, Alex?
You can pretty much just Google Yang Daily. I'm on every podcast hosting service. On YouTube, Yang Daily, Andrew Yang News. On Twitter at Yang Daily Cast.
Yes. And also, guys, all the links will be in the description box for this too, to follow him on Twitter and also subscribe on all the podcast apps. The links will be in the description box as well. All right, guys. So see you guys next time. Yang Gang.